Hello YouTubers, and welcome to another special production from Cardboard of the Rings, a bi-weekly podcast about the Lord of the Rings, the card game, which is a living card game by Fantasy Flight Games. Today we'll be taking a look at our latest article released on June 12th, 2012, and I'll be giving my initial impressions of some of our exciting news and a couple of our new card spoilers. So after giving this article a quick read, something that stands out the most is this article is centered around the hero that is going to be released in our upcoming adventure pack Foundations of Stone, which the article also mentions we should expect out sometime next week. So if that wasn't exciting enough news by itself, we also have two incredible cards spoiled, so let's go ahead and take a look at those now. In the same fashion as the Watcher in the Water adventure pack, which released a brand new version of the classic leadership hero Aragorn, in this upcoming adventure pack, Foundations of Stone, we get to see a brand new version of Glorfindel. For a long time, people have been complaining that the lore version is a little bit underpowered, so now we have a new spirit version to see if this plays a little bit more true to the Glorfindel people know and love from the novels. So at first glance, looking at this character, he has the same exact statistical allotment as before. He still has 3 willpower, he still has 3 attack, 1 defense, and 5 hit points. He's still a unique Noldor noble warrior, so he continues to feed into the new Noldor synergy we're beginning to see. But the one key difference here is that instead of a whopping 12 threat to start, which was so prohibitively expensive it prevented a lot of players from ever using Glorfindel, this new spirit version weighs in at a game-shattering 5 threats. So previously, our lowest threat was Bifur and Frodo Baggins tied for 7. Now we have a character that begins at 5 threats. But, as I'm sure you'll notice, all of his stats add up to a total of 12, so before reading any further into this card, it seems like an absolute bargain to get this guy on the table. He no longer has a healing ability, and what he has instead is forced, after Glorfindel exhausts to commit to the quest, raise your threat by 1. So you're saying to yourself, this hero looks really good on paper. He still has an astronomically low starting threat. This might enable people to integrate him into a secrecy deck, take advantage of Elrond's counsel for free to drop your threat down very, very low. You can still commit him to the quest turn after turn before he starts reaching beginning threat levels, even approaching Éowyn, who I believe has a 9 starting threat. So 3 willpower to the quest every turn is very significant, and he has the benefit where if you don't want him to be your primary quester, you can always have him attack. So a 5 starting threat, 3 attack hero is absolutely unheard of. Like I mentioned before, Bifur, even with Dane Ironfoot on the table, still only has a starting attack of 2, and he's 2 greater threats. He's got 5 hit points, so this guy seems at first rock solid, until we take a look at our second card spoiler for this adventure pack. Now, once we go ahead and take a look at this card, this is where it really kicks Glorfindel into overdrive. So this is a unique attachment, Light of Valinor, which for 1 spirit resource, so it's in the exact same sphere as our brand new iteration of Glorfindel, it simply reads, attached hero does not exhaust to commit to a quest. And what's really important about this card to keep in mind is that our new version of Glorfindel, that forced effect only triggers specifically when he exhausts to commit to a quest. So it's almost as if this attachment reads, attach it to Glorfindel, he never needs to give you any more threat than his starting 5. So if you want to include 3 copies of this in your deck, just to make absolute certain that you start with this in your beginning hand, if you're playing a secrecy deck to take advantage of those cards like Resourceful, or any other cards. There are a host of different leadership cards that are really effective in secrecy, letting you get out allies for next to nothing or even nothing. This is an extremely potent combination. Some players might think to play Unexpected Courage on our new Glorfindel to get the most out of his 3 willpower and 3 attack, but this is something that you can play in addition to Unexpected Courage. So this card, for its cost, even though it's unique, I think is extremely powerful, and I see this Glorfindel being played in a lot of solo player decks and multiplayer decks. He's just an extremely powerful card, and to kind of demonstrate how powerful he is, I've gone ahead and put together a deck using this new version of Glorfindel just to see some of the fun little combinations you can try and use with our newest hero. So before I do an in-depth analysis of why I've picked each of these cards for inclusion in my brand new Glorfindel deck, why don't we go ahead and take a brief overview of the different cards in my deck list just to give you some sort of an idea of what to expect before we get into those cards one by one. For heroes, I've got 3 of them, which means I'm not looking to take advantage of that secrecy discount, even though there are a lot of powerful cards like Resourceful, which really increases your resource generation, which could be easily exploited by the Glorfindel and Legacy of the Valinor card. I'm not going to be trying for that in this deck. There are also a number of leadership attachments which really facilitate you doing some damage, drawing some cards, getting allies onto the table for cheap, but at the moment, even though that's extremely viable, with Glorfindel and Light of Valinor, I'm not going to be trying to do that in this deck. The 3 heroes I've decided to include are the new version of Glorfindel, the new version of Aragorn that you'll see in Watcher in the Water, as well as Frodo Baggins. My allies are going to be the Imladris Stargazer, another upcoming card that we're going to be seeing, Arwen Undomiel, Bofur, Hinamarth Riversong, Gandalf, Northern Tracker, the Rittermark's Finest, West Road Traveler, and Rivendell Minstrel. For attachments, I'm going to be using our upcoming Asphalloth, a mount card they're releasing specifically for Glorfindel, Legacy of Valinor, like we revealed in this article, Fast Hitch, Unexpected Courage, Ancient Matham, Song of Wisdom, and a Burning Brand. And then for events, running pretty light on events this time, I'm simply going to be using a Test of Will, Elrond's Council, and Dwarven Tomb. So now that I've given you a very brief overview of this deck, let's go ahead and go break these cards down one by one just to see why I think each one of them is worthy of including in this deck, and what benefit they have or synergy they might have together. So as we touched on before, this brand new version of Glorfindel is definitely going to be the most important card in this deck. He's going to be an extremely powerful quester right off the bat for you, even though he's raising your threat, and he's going to be an extremely potent attacker. He's not much of a defender, but his pool of 5 hit points easily allows him to take some undefended attacks. His being a unique Noldor character enables a number of other cards in this deck, and as soon as you get Light of Valinor on him, he can quest and he can attack. If you give him any kind of readying effects, you can put that extra attack to huge use. Something this deck certainly lacks is going to be attack strength, and Glorfindel, especially in a solo player deck that Spirit and Lore is going to provide generally 1/2 of the massive attack strength that I'll need should I ever run into anything like Trolls or Nazgul, any really difficult opponents I need to destroy. Our second hero I'm going to be using is the brand new version of Aragorn. And why I chose this hero is, first of all, I wanted some sort of lore hero, which will tie in well with this deck's synergy, and second of all, he has very high attack strength. So like I said, probably this deck's greatest weakness is its inability to bring to bear a lot of attack strength. He's got 3 attack strength, but if I don't need to commit him to doing any attacking, since this is going to generally just be a solo player deck, if there's not an enemy on the table, or if I can scry a location or something like that coming off the encounter deck next, he can commit 2 willpower to questing, which is great. I'm going to be using Frodo Baggins for a lot of defending, but if I ever need to take any undefended attacks that won't kill a character, just like Glorfindel, since he has that pool of 5 hit points, he's really good to put some undefended attacks on. He does have 2 defense, so I can take advantage of that as well in a sort of dire situation if I want to have Frodo do some questing. And then he's also got his ability to drop my threat to my starting level once per game. So just in case you get really unlucky with your threat draws, your card draws, he can still drop your threat to your starting level at the end of the game or whenever your threat starts to get out of control. So not an absolutely necessary action, but certainly useful in this quest. Our third hero is going to be Frodo Baggins, who himself comes in at a very, very reasonable 7 threats. And what he's primarily going to be doing is being left ready to do defending. So even though he only has 2 defense strength and 2 hit points, as soon as he's damaged, you can cancel that damage and raise your threats. And what this allows is any kind of undefended attack that would kill an enemy, you can simply drop that damage onto Frodo. Even if your threat starts to get astronomically high and you keep playing cards to lower your threat and it just gets completely out of control, you can always use Aragorn's ability to drop your threat back down and get you back in the game. Although unfortunately I don't have access to any kind of leadership cards in this deck, I'd like to be able to use Dunedain Warning, for example. He's going to be a very powerful defender. If I can give him extra actions each turn, he can defend against multiple allies. If I can get cards such as a Burning Brand on him, he can control shadow effects extraordinarily well, and all around Frodo Baggins is going to be a rock-solid defender for this deck, and I really like this trio of heroes. Their total threat is going to be a measly 24, which gives you a lot of opportunities to use Frodo's ability. It's still a very low starting threat, so you've got a lot of opportunities to have enemies sit there in the staging area while you quest for more willpower than they can bring measly threat against you, so there are a lot of opportunities for the players to do extraordinarily well with this deck. Moving on to the allies, one ally that I'm certain to include in this deck is going to be the upcoming ally Imladris Stargazer. I really want to have 3 copies of this card because for 2 resources you can put a Noldor ally onto the table and you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck. What this allows me to do is I can definitely include 3 copies of a lot of different cards without having to worry about a lot of dead cards. So for example, I really probably am only going to benefit from one Imladris Stargazer in play at a time. So if I begin play with one in my hand, and I play one, and I start scrying the top of my deck, if it looks like I'm going to be drawing another Imladris Stargazer anytime soon, it would make sense if I rearrange those cards in a way so that I'm not going to draw that Stargazer. And round after round, as I keep scrying the top of my deck, I'll keep pushing that Stargazer down, just because it's not going to do me any good to draw it. The same thing goes with a lot of the different unique allies in this deck. If there's no benefit, for example, for me to have 2 Arwen Undomiel in play, then there's no reason that I should draw this card. So keep this type of thing in mind when you get your starting hand. Maybe if you draw 2 Imladris Stargazers in your opening hand, it might just be worth taking that mulligan, just so you don't have to get a lot of dead cards in your hand. So just keep that in mind. Our second ally is going to be Arwen Undomiel, who is definitely a card you want to try to get in your starting hand. For 2 cost, she has 2 willpower, which is fantastic alone, but in addition, as soon as she commits to the quest or exhausts in any way, you can pick one of your characters, which is almost always going to be Frodo Baggins, and he gains Sentinel, which doesn't do anything in a non-multiplayer setting, but importantly, he gains +1 defense strength until the end of the round. So if you load him up with Unexpected Courage or Fast Hitch, and he has a ton of different actions to use, maybe he has Burning Brand as well, he's going to be bringing to bear a total of 3 defense strength before you ever have to use his ability. So he's extremely powerful with Arwen. Just remember you can only use that cancellation effect of his once per turn, so make sure to defend against the big bad guys first. Next up, I have another unique ally, which is Bofur, and why I like him is specifically for his quest action. So after staging, before you resolve the quest, if you're going to fail the quest, or if you just need a couple additional points of willpower committed, you're always welcome to spend 1 spirit resource to put him into play from your hand, exhaust him, and commit to the quest. If you do not happen to quest successfully, so if you gain any amount of threat, he simply stays in play, but if you do quest successfully, you've got to return him to your hand, but sometimes that 2 willpower can make all the difference, and for just 1 resource, he's very, very good. If for any reason you need an ally to just dump on the table and let him do some chump blocking for you, maybe if you're up against some really big enemies that are starting to overwhelm Frodo, Bofur is definitely an option, even though he's expensive. Hinnamarth Riversong I've included in this deck, 2 copies just because he's very cheap. He has 1 attack strength, he has 1 willpower, and importantly, he'll allow you to scry the top card of the encounter deck. So if there's a location coming up, you'll know that you can commit all of your characters to questing. You'll know if there's an enemy coming up that you have to make sure to leave some blockers or attackers to deal with that in some way, and if there's a treachery, you can maybe be sure to leave some open spirit resources that turn to cancel any kind of nasty treachery, or you can make sure to just do whatever actions you need to take to make sure that that has really minimal effect. He's also a great chump blocker if you need to use him for that, so overall, very strong card here. Gandalf is going to have 3 copies in this deck as well. I think this pretty much goes without saying, but for this deck that really lacks attack strength, his being able to interplay and deal 4 damage immediately to 1 enemy is extremely powerful. He's an extremely powerful, potent quester, and he's also got 4 attack strength. So if there's ever a really big, nasty enemy in play, be it a mountain troll or whatever it happens to be, Gandalf is your man for trying to get that down and, make the rest of the quest go a little bit more smoothly for you. So definitely try and save him for big, nasty enemies. Northern Tracker is also going to be included in this deck, and this is kind of an interesting card for me. During the core set, I think this was an extremely powerful card, but as the Dwaro-Delph cycle has been evolving, I think he's kind of started seeing much less play than he used to, especially for me. But one of the biggest benefits of him in this deck is if things start to get out of control in the staging area with really big enemies. For that 4 spirit resources, he at least has 2 attack strength, so you can contribute some sort of reasonable attack with him. And then of course, if he's able to commit to the quest, you can put a lot of different progress tokens on locations in the staging area. Combined with the Asphalloth attachment that's coming out in Foundations of Stone, this is going to be a really potent combo to sweep the staging area clean of locations round after round. So make sure to keep in mind that in a multiplayer game, he only gets more and more powerful. Since you can always only travel to 1 location per turn, if the Northern Tracker can eliminate, say, 3 or 4 locations on 1 turn, then he's extraordinarily powerful. I'm also including 2 copies of the Rittermark's Finest, which isn't the most exciting ally in the world, but combined with Northern Tracker and Asphalloth, you can get rid of some really nasty locations quite easily. It's not going to be able to use its quest or attack action if you exhaust it and discard it to put 2 progress tokens on any location, but it does give you another point of attack power that can power up your attacks. It does give you another quest point. As I keep saying, this deck is really hurting on the attack front just because outside of the tactics sphere, there aren't really any attachments that let characters do more damage. So this is just another little bit of assistance with that. I'm including 3 copies of the West Road Traveler, which again is a cheap ally, 2 willpower for 2 resources, and if it just so happens that you're forced into traveling to a certain location, or maybe if you actually benefit from traveling to a certain location, you can play it, swap the active location with any other location in the staging area. Maybe you can go to the Old Forest Road twice in the same game, or maybe you can get rid of Moor Goldwyn or a really bad location like that that hurts you for questing. So West Road Traveler at the very least is going to be doing some solid questing for you, but at best it's going to get rid of some really nasty when active effects. I've also gone ahead and included 2 copies of the Rivendell Minstrel, which, since this deck is going to be generating very few lore resources, you're probably going to want to save your resources up for. So if you're not lucky enough to draw a Song of Wisdom to really help fix some of that resource generation, Rivendell Minstrel is going to be an opportunity for you to search through your deck for a Song of Wisdom, and to put that probably onto Frodo. That allows Frodo's resources to be used as lore or spirit, and it also allows him to count as a lore character so that you can put a burning brand on him and start getting rid of shadow effects very quickly and effectively. And then it's also a 2 willpower ally, so questing should not be too much of a problem for this deck, especially in single player, but it should also do quite well in multiplayer, preferably alongside a deck that's going to have some sort of strong attacking capability, and could maybe play Rivendell Blades on Glorfindel, just because that would make him far more powerful than he already is. Now, moving on to our attachments, I mentioned that we're going to be including 3 copies of the unique attachment Asphalloth in this deck, and the character that you're going to want to put this on is going to be Glorfindel. So as soon as he's stuck on Glorfindel, if you get this out maybe the second turn, and this is certainly something you'd want to be using your lore resources on, you can start picking a location each and every round to put 2 progress tokens on. So not only does this allow you to circumvent really terrible locations like the Brown Lands with 5 threat but only requiring 1 quest point, it really lets you gang up with Northern Tracker and any number of other effects to get rid of really nasty locations very quickly. This plus Cave Torch gets rid of a lot of different scenarios that we're going to be seeing in the Long Dark, Foundations of Stone, and the first quest of Khazad-dûm. So this is a really potent attachment. If you're playing a scenario where this might not do you as much good, you can always mulligan it from your starting hand. You can always make sure that the Imladris Stargazer is pushing that down the deck, just so you don't draw it if you don't need it. We're definitely going to be including 3 copies of Light of Valinor. As I've mentioned before, this is like the Unexpected Courage, specifically for Noldor or Sylvan heroes. We're going to be putting this on top of Glorfindel, obviously, so as soon as he has a copy of this, it would be great if it started in your opening hand, but as soon as you can get it out, he's not going to be generating any additional threat during the turn. So this is definitely a must-play card. Next up is Fast Hitch. So for 1 lore resource, you go ahead and stick this on Frodo, and he can quest and defend. He can do 2 defends a round. He can defend and contribute his 1 measly attack strength to overcoming a big enemy. But this is a dirt cheap card. It has huge effect. It makes Frodo an even better defender than he already is. So if he's got a Burning Brand attached to him, he's absorbing shadow effects all day long, defending all day long. This makes him an even more fantastic card. We, of course, have the tried and true Unexpected Courage. So for 2 spirit resources, we gain basically a mirror copy of any of our characters. Glorfindel can attack and defend, it's probably better to have him attack and quest, but the same goes for Aragorn, and the exact same goes for Frodo. So you'd certainly probably want to play this on either Aragorn or Glorfindel, but keep in mind, since we've got that Light of Valinor card, it's probably best on Aragorn. We have Ancient Matham, which is going to allow us a little bit of card draw, which is something that this deck certainly lacks, but combined with Imladris Stargazer, hopefully you can get to these cards quickly, or get to your Stargazers quickly, and set those 3 cards drawn to be as beneficial as possible. You could also use Gandalf for his card draw effects, but this is just going to be one more option for the players to really churn through their deck and hopefully get that good stuff that they really need. We talked about including Song of Wisdom, which is primarily going to be played on Frodo, but if you happen to draw your second copy, you're always welcome to play it on Glorfindel. It's probably not as useful. There's not really a lot of lore cards in this deck, but the goal here is to get a Burning Brand on Frodo, and to also get enough resources to play Asphalloth, and that's really all you need to concern yourself with, along with the occasional fast hitches. And then, of course, we have 2 copies of a Burning Brand, which you could play on Aragorn, but is much better when played on Frodo. So if you're having trouble, you're playing a quest with some really potent shadow effects, you could easily have Aragorn take over as your defender. Since he does have 2 defense strength and 5 hit points, Arwen boosts his defense just as easily as she boosts Frodo's. He's going to be a very excellent defender for you. You're not going to be able to take advantage of his 3 attack strength, but you're not going to have to worry about hoping to draw a Song of Wisdom. So if you're playing a quest with some really bad shadow effects like Into the Pit and the 7th level come to mind, where you're adding a lot of goblin enemies to the staging area, if on the second turn you can play a Burning Brand on Aragorn, maybe he'd be a good defender for you. So your play, as always, is going to have to be a little bit flexible depending on the quest. For events, I'm not including too many. I've only got 3 copies of a Test of Will to cancel when revealed effects. This is again tried and true, just like Unexpected Courage, one of the only ways in the game to deal with when revealed effects, so I thought it was definitely necessary for inclusion in this deck. If you're only drawing 1 card per turn in a solo game and this saves you from a treachery, then you can spend the rest of the turn doing whatever you want. I've gone ahead and included 3 copies of Elrond's Counsel instead of the Galadrim's Greeting, and my reasoning behind this is we're going to be starting play with Glorfindel, who's a unique Noldor character, so for no cost to us whatsoever, if we have 3 of these on our opening hand, we can drop our threat by 3 for each of these cards, and for each of these cards give a different character, like Frodo or Aragorn, +1 willpower until the end of the phase. So while you're questing, this is an extremely powerful card, and I've gone ahead and paired it with our last card, the event Dwarven Tomb. So for 1 resource, you can return a spirit card from your discard pile to your hand. You play Elrond's Counsel for 0, drop your threat by 3, boost a character's willpower by 1, and then you can pay a measly single resource for 1 of the 2 copies of Dwarven Tomb in this deck. So you can return that Elrond's Counsel to your hand and go ahead and drop your threat by an additional 3 and gain even more willpower to make sure that you don't fail the quest. As I mentioned before, I'm not exactly solo player, so these are just some thoughts. It seems to me like this is going to be a really powerful solo deck. I'm excited to start trying this out as soon as I get my hands on the Foundations of Stone Adventure Pack next week. So in the meantime, feel free to leave your comments or suggestions to tweaks or changes I could make in the comments below. If you happen to try this deck out, definitely let me know what you think of it, and if you have any suggestions for alterations I could make, little tweaks here and there, I would love to hear them. So as always, either like or subscribe this video if you liked what you saw, and if you have any comments for future content you'd like to see from us at Cardboard of the Rings, be sure to let us know, and as always, thank you for listening and thank you for watching. See you soon.